Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through the sources so you get the insights fast.
That's the idea. Straight to the core.
Today, we're looking at a really interesting way to think about basically everything we do. It comes from N. Karanika's Professional Generalism.
Chapter 11, specifically. It lays out these three core activities: reaction, self-change, and the transformation of others.
And what grabbed me is that it's not just about people. The author uses this term unities, which could be, well, plants, animals, you, me, even big groups like organizations. It's quite broad.
It is. And the goal today, I think, is to really get our heads around how these activities link up, the kind of energy they demand.
Right. And maybe give you, our listener, a different angle on your own actions, your own interactions day to day.
A new perspective.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So this whole thing really starts with how these unities handle energy, right? Energy coming at them.
Okay.
The first one, the most basic, is reaction. RE, the text calls it.
Reaction, like just...
Essentially, yeah. It's that fundamental response. It happens when energy hits you. And the key thing is it's pretty much inevitable.
You can't not react on some level.
Exactly. And it can be internal, a thought, a feeling pops up, or it could be external, something you actually do.
Like the example in the source about getting comments on a report.
Perfect example. You get the feedback. Maybe inside you feel, I don't know, annoyed, defensive.
Sure, happens.
That's the internal reaction. But then maybe you decide, okay, I'll actually use this feedback and revise the report. That's an external reaction.
Got it. So it's that initial stimulus response kind of loop, but it can be internal feelings and external actions.
Precisely. And we probably do this constantly without even thinking about it.
Which naturally kind of flows into the next activity, doesn't it? Self-change, or SC.
It builds right on top of reaction.
So it's more than just that first response. It's about using your own energy to adjust internally.
Yes, exactly. It's an internal reconfiguration, using energy you invest yourself. And the author makes this interesting split here.
Between adaptation and self-transformation.
Right. Adaptation, AD, is maybe more automatic, less conscious adjusting, like a plant turning towards the sun.
Okay.
But self-transformation, ST, that takes more effort. It usually requires knowing yourself, being aware.
So back to that feedback example. If someone says my presentation was, I don't know, a bit flat, and next time I just consciously try to vary my tone a bit more, maybe that's adaptation.
Could be a relatively straightforward adjustment.
But if I really think, okay, why am I monotone? Is it nerves, lack of passion? And then I actively work on, say, my confidence or practice delivering with more energy. That feels more like self-transformation.
That's a great way to put it. It implies deeper work based on self-knowledge. And like you said, self-change always includes that initial reaction. That text labels it RESC for short. Reaction plus self-change.
RESC.
Okay. And to the third type, transformation of others.
TO. Sounds more complex already.
It is. Because now you're not just reacting or changing yourself. You're intentionally using your energy to try and affect change in another living unity.
So trying to convince someone or teach someone or lead a team.
All potentially examples, yes. The source stresses that doing this well usually means you need some awareness of the other unity state. Where are they at? What's their energy like?
You can't just barge in and expect change.
Well, you can, but it might not be effective or ethical. Ideally, you understand their perspective. And this activity, transformation of others, it presumes you've already reacted and likely undergone some self-change yourself to be in a position to influence.
So it builds on the first two.
Right. That's why it's labeled RESCO. Reaction, self-change, and transformation of others.
That's RESCO. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because my first thought is these must happen in sequence, like 1, 2, 3. But you're saying...
Not necessarily, no. The book is clear that these can overlap. They can happen at the same time. Think about a difficult conversation you're reacting internally, maybe adjusting your own approach on the fly, self-change, and trying to persuade the other person, transformation of others, all at once.
Wow, okay. So the categories RE, SC, TO, they're more like conceptual tools, ways to analyze what's happening with the energy.
Exactly. They help us understand how energy is being received, processed, and directed. It's not always neat boxes in reality.
That's a really important distinction.
And thinking about how they relate, the source uses this idea of them being nested.
Like those Russian dolls?
Pretty much reaction, RE, is the core, the smallest doll. Self-change, RESC, includes reaction. And transformation of others, RESTO, includes both reaction and self-change. It's layered.
Okay, that makes sense visually. And does this layering tell us anything about, like, effort? energy cost.
It does. Generally speaking, rested out trying to transform others demands the most energy.
I can believe that.
Then RESC, self-change, takes a moderate amount. And just RE, the basic reaction, usually takes the least.
So if you're feeling totally wiped out, maybe check how much resico you're trying to do.
It's worth considering, definitely. And related to that is duration. If you assume, similar contexts and resources,
Yeah.
simple reaction might be over quickly. Self-change, RESC, usually takes longer. Then there's a combination mentioned. Read to a reaction, adaptation, plus transformation of others.
Yeah.
That's longer still.
And the full resitu, the one involving deliberate self-transformation and trying to change others.
That's likely the longest process of all. It requires the most sustained energy investment.
Okay. Now, you mentioned awareness earlier. How does consciousness fit into this picture? Do you have to be aware you're reacting?
That's a great question. The text suggests that while you might not consciously notice every single tiny reaction,
Like blinking or something.
maybe even subtler internal shifts, but for self-change, and especially for transformation of others, some level of awareness is usually involved.
Yeah.
It's hard to deliberately transform yourself or someone else if you're completely oblivious.
But what about, like, biological stuff? The book mentions a virus example.
Right. So a virus gets in your body, your immune system reacts. Cells change to fight it off. That's reaction and a form of self-change happening at a biological subunity level.
Even before I feel sick.
Exactly. You, as the whole person, might be unaware initially. So whether we call something conscious or unconscious really depends on the level we're looking at.
Interesting. Like the social psychology experiments on conformity, maybe individuals feel like they're making a conscious choice, but from a group perspective, it looks like unconscious adaptation.
That's a good parallel. There could be layers of awareness. And what's unique about us humans is we can become aware of our subconscious drivers, our automatic patterns,
And potentially change them.
and potentially try to influence them. Yes, that's a key human capacity.
This discussion of automatic patterns versus conscious choice seems to lead into another idea from the source, these different kinds of laws governing how energy interacts.
It's an interesting way to frame it. Not laws like legislation, obviously, but governing principles.
Okay, what are they?
Well, the most basic level, reaction, RE, can be subject to what the author calls natural or innate laws.
Like physics or biology.
Pretty much. Think gravity, basic chemical reactions, your body healing a cut. These are things we observe consistently, universally accepted truths, but we don't fully know their ultimate origin. They just are.
Right.
Then, still under reaction, you can have responses based on learned associations. These are called fundamental laws.
Learned associations, like habits, automatic responses.
Exactly. Think classical conditioning, stimulus-response pairs. Kahneman's System 1 thinking fits here, like slamming the brakes if the car head stops suddenly. You don't usually think about it. You just do it because you've learned that association.
But these aren't universal, right? My learned reactions might differ from yours.
Absolutely. They're based on individual experience and can change. Then we move up a level to basic laws. These need more cognitive energy, more System 2 thinking.
So more deliberate rule following.
Kind of. They're like if-then-else extensions of those fundamental laws. The example given is calculating derivatives in calculus if you haven't done it in ages. You have to consciously recall and apply the rules.
It's not automatic anymore.
Nope. And finally, there are emerging laws. These pop up in novel situations where you have to combine existing knowledge, fundamental and basic laws in new ways.
Like problem solving on the fly.
Yeah, knowledge-based behavior. Think of a doctor diagnosing a really rare disease, piecing together symptoms and knowledge in a way they haven't quite done before, or maybe figuring out tricky new software.
And these emerging laws, once figured out, could eventually become basic or even fundamental laws if you do them enough.
That's the idea. They can become ingrained over time.
It's tricky, though, isn't it? Trying to categorize these mental things. The source mentions the difficulty because it's all happening in that, what was it, immaterial energy space.
Yeah, intentions, thoughts, motivations, they aren't physical forces you can easily measure. The text suggests maybe response time could be a clue. Faster responses might indicate more fundamental automatic laws are at play.
Interesting point. Okay, so we have reactions, self-change, transforming others, governed by different laws. What else is unique about humans in this framework?
Well, the author points out something really crucial, theorizing.
Theorizing, as in coming up with theories.
Yes, but it's broader than just academic theories. It's our unique ability to use information, experiment, generate knowledge to understand things, the present, the past, even predict the future.
How's that different from, say, adaptation?
Well, adaptation is more like adjusting based on direct feedback or environmental pressure. Evolution works that way. Animals influence each other. But theorizing is about building mental models of how things work.
So it's not just copying, like genetics,
Or just adapting.
or just influencing. It's actively trying to figure out the why.
Precisely. It involves sensing information, composing it into models in our minds, decomposing things to see the parts, like a biologist dissecting an animal to understand its systems, or a doctor reviewing past cases to diagnose a current one. We build models of energy interactions.
And this is why conversation, reflection, debate, even doubt are so important for us, because we're constantly building and refining these theories.
Exactly. It allows us to question the rules, not just follow them. We can even try to understand and potentially alter natural processes because we can theorize about them. Many of the procedures we follow daily are based on someone else's theorizing, not necessarily our own deep understanding.
That leads nicely into the ethical side, especially regarding that third activity, transformation of others.
Yes, the source revisits this. When it comes to trying to change other humans, the ethical stance is pretty clear. You generally need consent.
Right. You need agreement on what the goal is.
Which is why something like social engineering is usually considered unacceptable manipulation. It aims to transform people without their knowledge or consent.
Makes sense.
And there's an interesting point about physics here, too. People sometimes try to apply Newton's third law, equal and opposite reaction, to human interactions.
Like if I push you, you push back equally.
Kind of, but the source argues it doesn't really work that way with living beings, especially humans. Our reaction isn't just a simple physical response. It's influenced by all that immaterial stuff, intentions, history, emotions.
Yeah, if someone attacks me, my reaction in self-defense isn't necessarily equal and opposite in a physics sense. A court would look at intent and context.
Exactly. Our internal state mediates the response. The author notes that even sciences dealing with humans are increasingly acknowledging this immaterial energy, yet there's sometimes a reluctance to apply the same thinking to non-human living things. It's a bit of a paradox.
Okay, we've covered a lot, the three activities, the energy, the awareness, the laws, theorizing, ethics. So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Yeah, how does this connect back?
Well, we started this saying it's a shortcut to knowledge, a way to get those aha moments. Hopefully hearing about reaction, self-change, transformation of others gives you a new framework, a new vocabulary maybe to analyze what's going on in your own life.
Thinking about where your energy goes.
Right. Are you mostly reacting? Are you consciously working on self-change? Or are you investing a lot in trying to transform others? Maybe seeing specific situations through this RSK Reskedo lens sparks an insight.
It really raises an important question, I think. How does understanding these fundamental activity types empower you, personally, to be more intentional, more deliberate in your interactions and maybe your own growth?
That's a great question to ponder. Where are you investing your energy, and what kinds of laws, habits, rules, conscious choices are driving your responses?
It's definitely food for thought.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us into these concepts.
My pleasure. It's fascinating stuff.
And for everyone listening, here's something to think about. What's one area in your life, maybe recently, where you've noticed that clear interplay between your initial reaction to something and the subsequent self-changes you decided to make? Worth reflecting on.